welcome back to Unlock Your Blocks. I'm your host, Elyssa Smith. You might be struggling with some physical symptoms that you may have no idea are tied to your self-sabotage. My guest today is Ina Toppler. Ina Toppler is a board-certified clinical nutritionist with over 20 years of experience in clinical practice. She's the founder of Complete Nutrition and Wellness, an integrative practice, the creator of ThyroLove, which is a brand new supplement specifically formulated for those with Hashimoto's. She's also the host of Thyroid Mystery Solved, Hashimoto's and hypothyroid. Sorry, I'm butchering all the terminology. Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism revealed podcast, and the educator behind several highly sought after programs: Thyroid Mystery Solved, Hashimoto's Roadmap, 10-Day Hashimoto's Weight Loss Transformation, and the Hashimoto's Energy Breakthrough. So this is her specialty, guys. Like, this is what she focuses on. She has personal experience and professional experience in all these areas of functional and holistic health. As a health detective, educator, thinker outside the box, and Hashimoto's rebel herself — I love that, by the way, Ina. It so defines you. Ina loves getting to the real root of hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's and has helped tens of thousands optimize their thyroids and support their immune systems. She knows you're struggling. She's here to tell you that you're not alone and show you as many answers as she can starting right now. So if this is something that you deal with, if you deal with Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, which I'll eventually be able to say by the end of this podcast, I promise, this is the person that you want to follow. So immediately go look at the show notes and find all her places that you can follow her, because she's got gold. She's just handing out gold. And Ina, you and I have known each other for what, about a year now, right? Something like that. I'm so grateful that you're coming on today. Thank you so much for being here, because I cannot wait for you to share just your story and the story of your clients that you've helped, and how self-sabotage actually can be rooted into our physical symptoms. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here and to spend this time with you and to talk about this. And really, I know I specialize in Hashimoto's now, but, before I did all types of health concerns. So whether someone has a thyroid issue that's listening to this, or any kind of ailment, whether it's any autoimmune disease or any type of health concern, whether that's fatigue or sleep issues or skin issues or IBS, you name it, this conversation is going to be really, really helpful, because so much of what happens physically is affected by everything else. So it doesn't matter what condition you have, it's going to bring a lot of value to you.
Yeah, I think so too. And, we talk a lot on this podcast about specifically 5 types of self-sabotage. So we have the 3 Ps. We have procrastination, perfection, people pleasing. And then they have 2 buddies: imposter syndrome and negative self-talk. And all of those things tend to play in. And I know personally from all of the trauma that I went through and all of the physical ailments and physical issues that I had as a result of a lot of that trauma, and then how you can end up in this sort of vicious cycle, not being able to take proper care of your body because there are these things that are just stopping you. You have mindset blocks. So I can't wait to dive into a little bit more of that with you. Let's start off. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you get to be the household name with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism and all the holistic and functional perspective that you bring?
Of course. So I started out actually doing something completely different, but just to back up a little bit more, I was someone who was always kind of a sickly child, and, I had colds. I mean, nothing was majorly wrong, but I always had a cold or I was tired. And then as I got a little older, I had skin issues, which bothered me the most out of everything. But then, I was really tired and I had IBS, which is where you just have all sorts of weird digestive issues that, when you go to the doctor, they tell you, well, we don't know why it is, just try to exercise more, which was not helping because I was tired. I had headaches, I had PMS, I had a lot of things, and I had a lot of blood work done, and everything was just coming back normal, but yet I was feeling off. And at that point, I'd graduated college and I worked on Wall Street in finance. And so it was a very fun but demanding job. And all of my friends were going out and doing stuff after, and at 5 o'clock, I would come home and want to go to bed. And I started to seek out help. So I went to my primary and they told me my blood work was normal. I went to another primary and another, and then they sent me to specialists. I saw an endocrinologist, a gastroenterologist, a dermatologist, a gynecologist. There was probably more. And the thing is that none of these providers were actually speaking to each other or trying to see if my symptoms were related. And instead, they just sort of blamed me. And then I blamed myself and literally just felt like my body was betraying me, which happens so often. And I was 23 at the time. And they were telling me maybe I'm depressed, tried to give me depression medication, which nothing against the medication, but I kept trying to say, I'm not depressed. Maybe I'm feeling depressed because I'm not feeling well, right? But I'm not actually depressed. And so it naturally, and this was, we're going back, this is when 2002 ish. So this was before, there was so much more into internet. This was when social media wasn't what it is now. I mean, I think we had social media, but not that much. I mean, even like Whole Foods, the store wasn't, I think they were just building one in New York City. So like there just wasn't a lot of information out there. And I started to research and I stumbled on some information saying, hey, like what you eat matters. And, if you have a lot of silver fillings, which are made of mercury, they can affect you. And if you eat conventional meat, there's antibiotics and hormones in there, and that's not good. And hey, if you drink tap water, there's, toxins in there. And I was, 23, like, what do I know? And so I thought it was very interesting. And so through some of that research, I found a functional medicine doctor. So he actually was a clinical nutritionist and a naturopath, which is what I do. And, after seeing all these regular doctors who essentially were sending me all these specialists and nothing was happening, when I saw this functional doctor, he ran very specific blood tests, not just general ones. And he was able to see, that there was a lot actually wrong. But I was really happy about that, right? Because it wasn't that, like, I just hate being told, hey, your blood work's normal, but they were running just basic blood work that really wasn't actually looking at what was happening. And he was looking more at not like what the body is, but the function of the body, right? So yeah, like your liver is okay, but how is your liver actually functioning? How is it detoxing? And we found so many different things. I had an overgrowth of candida, which is a type of yeast. I had parasites. I had heavy metals, specifically mercury and copper. I had so many different things. And actually, before I saw him, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And for those who are not familiar, that is an autoimmune condition where your own body, your immune system is actually attacking your thyroid, thinking that your thyroid is not your friend and that's something that's bad. And so that creates a slow thyroid. But when I was diagnosed with that through a conventional endocrinologist, I was essentially told there's nothing that to do for that. I was told, hey, your thyroid is fine, but yes, you have this autoimmune, so your thyroid is being attacked, but it's okay. It's not so bad right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait and see and do nothing.
Yep.
And
My
then,
jaw is dropping.
um, yeah, we're going to do nothing. And then eventually, when your thyroid gets attacked enough that it actually does become slow, then we're going to give you medicine and you'll have to take it forever. That was the answer that I got. So that's actually what really drove me to be like, wait, there's got to be a better way. Even at 23, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm like, is there really nothing I can do? And so when I started working with this functional doctor, he explained to me that there is things you can do because when you have these metals and these toxins and the infections that you have and all these imbalances and deficiencies and you're eating foods that are inflaming your body, I was eating tons of different things, then that's going to actually affect how your immune system is functioning. And so lo and behold, I started doing all that. Obviously, it wasn't like this overnight. It took time, but I started to change my diet. I started taking the right supplements, I started cleansing, I started doing all of these things. And I started to feel better. My skin cleared
Hey.
up. I lost 10 pounds. My energy came back and my hormones started to be even more balanced. My IBS went away. Again, it wasn't overnight. It took time, but all of these things started to get better and better. And I always loved science, even though I went to school for finance. I loved science. And so I remember seeing this doctor and asking, hey, like, well, tell me about this. Like, what does this test mean? And why are you testing for this? And like, I was so interested. And he's like, well, why don't you do this? I'm like, I don't know, maybe. So I actually went back to school, not to do it for work, just to learn for myself because it was so interesting because I wanted to see what else can I do to help myself. Like, hey, if all this happened, can I like biohack this and like, what else? And so I went back to school and got my master's and did a ton of continuing ed in like all different areas of functional health. And then again, for myself, but then I started helping friends and friends of friends. And then, now 20 years later, here I am. And at first, for the first probably 7 or 8 years, I did everything, like every condition. But then because Hashimoto is something I have and it's so near dear to my heart, and I just didn't think there was enough information out there about it specifically, I niched more and more into this over time. But, what's so interesting and what I'm so excited to get into with you today is that it's such a multifaceted approach, right? And for me, as much as I started to just work on the biochemistry with this doctor, and I got far with that, but I didn't get to where I wanted to be 100%. And it wasn't until I started looking at all of these other things, right? So, how I'm taking care of myself, nervous system regulation, my past traumas, my thoughts, my beliefs, just all of these things. I mean, even things like meditation. I was like, what? You just sit there? This is ridiculous, right? I
I think
still
we've all
remember.
been there. I very much relate to that.
So, but it wasn't until I started doing that that I really saw things skyrocket. I remember there was a therapist I was seeing, and by the way, it's a funny story because I went to therapy because a lot of my friends were going, and I thought it was cool. And I was like, well, I don't have any problems. No, but I mean, listen, in all fairness, in outward, like if someone was to look at my life, like I'm not someone who you would think, oh, she has problems, right? And there's so
Right.
many people who were
You're
dealing with
like
so much, like, you know,
functioning and
yeah,
yeah.
at that point, I think I was 25. I was living with my boyfriend. I had a great job. I started this new business. What all the things, right? But things stressed me a lot, and little things would make me feel like, oh my god, like this is the end of the world kind of thing. And so I went for that. And I remember I said to her, Ellen, I'm here because I don't have any problems, but we can work on like this and this. And she was like, okay. What I want to talk about is this one thing that she said. One of the first things she asked me, I remember I was really upset about something. I think a coworker or something. And I was like, oh, I'm just so mad. And she goes, okay, well, where do you feel this anger? And I was like, I don't know. What you talking about, lady? Like in my head, what do you mean? Why do I feel that? Because I was so disconnected from my body. And there's a lot of past experiences that now I know got me to that disconnection that I didn't even understand that like we can feel thoughts in our body. And I mean, we laugh about it now, but 20 years ago or 20 something years ago, it was kind of just, I didn't know any better. But just to show essentially that, there's just so much more to that body brain connection that sometimes we don't realize when we have specific health ailments, but it's so important.
It really is. Thank you so much. And I think you hit on something so important and so powerful because I can imagine that there's somebody listening right now who just heard you say that you kept going to all the doctors and doing all the tests, but they were all general tests and everyone kept coming back to you and saying, "You're the problem. There's nothing wrong with your body. You are the problem." Because I know that I have had so many clients who come to me and they've had massive, complex trauma of some sort and then now they have autoimmune issues and, whatever it is and they keep getting tested. I had one client that went all the way to like multiple Mayo clinics and had all these tests done. And she very clearly had physical symptoms, but they kept telling her nothing was wrong. And if you talk about like what your brain goes through, if you have any sort of trauma that you know about, it makes the world feel like an unsafe place. So then you start getting told that actually what is going on with you is in your mind, or actually there's not anything really wrong with you. And it compounds all of these survival, messages that you're not okay and it's all in your mind and you're the problem if there is something wrong. And I just wanted to stop and kind of honor that experience that you had because it's so crazy making to continually go after getting the tests done and going to multiple doctors and then to have the common denominator be reflected back to you. I guess you're just bad at this or you're making this up. So the fact that you had the fortitude to just keep researching, find somebody who can tell you something and then you're like, oh, maybe if I do a couple different things then I can start down this path, and then you found somebody who could help you and mentor you and then you're like, what else could I do? I just love that about you. That's I think what is part of your magic, Ina, is that you geek out like I do on my stuff. You geek out on your stuff that way, and you're just kind of like, what else? What else is there? What more could I do to help? So that's really beautiful. I love that this stemmed from some passion that you had to help yourself, and then you got results, and then it's like, well, how do we even maximize those results now? So I'd love to hear from you a little bit. So now this is what you do. You have this empire now that where you're helping people with their thyroid issues and Hashimoto specifically. Was there a point where in your journey where any of your own self-sabotage tendencies got in the way of your healing process? Or you can also alternatively answer this about your clients, because now that you've seen all these, tens of thousands of clients, I'm sure there are patterns that you are aware of with people who are trying to heal their bodies with functional medicine because I mean, I know I'm like this. I'm like, I'm going to tell on myself first. When I first started on my functional healing journey, it was like, oh my gosh, I have to change everything. I have to start watching really carefully the quality of food that I'm eating, and I have to start taking these supplements, and it's kind of a drag, and I have to go and get poked with needles and figure this stuff out. It really stopped me at first because it felt like I was already so overloaded in my life, and now you're adding in like needing my own master's degree in my body, like in the study of myself, in order to just get to feeling better. And once I got through that initial part, it's fantastic on the other side. Like, I love not feeling bad all the time. It's amazing. But can you talk a little bit about what you see or what you've experienced with blockages to the actual healing process itself?
Definitely. So I think let's just back up for a second and talk about some of the physiology that happens, because I think that's going to help everyone understand how those blockages actually affect what's going on physically, right? Because often we think, oh, I'm tired. Well, maybe it's my thyroid, maybe it's my adrenals, maybe it's because I'm deficient or whatever it is, right? Which is
It's my
important.
hormones. It's my, I didn't eat enough protein. It's like, oh my gosh, yes, it could be
And
overwhelming.
the thing is, like, it could be all of those things, right? But if we think about what's actually happening on like the inside, right? So we know that our body has all of these different hormones that it's constantly keeping in this very important and balanced symphony, right? And so we have cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And so when, like, if we think back to ancient times, right? When someone is being chased, right, by a lion, a tiger, or bear, there's a lot of physiological changes that happen. So when they feel the threat of that, first, our blood is actually going to thicken.
Okay,
Why?
wait. So I talk about this concept all the time, but I did not know that. Okay, that's wild. Because
Yeah.
we know that the major systems that you don't need if you're running from an animal, like your digestive system, reproductive, immune, we know that those, like I talk about that all the time. Those ones go down, right? Because we don't need them. I did not know that your actual blood thickens. This is freaking me out a little
Yeah.
bit.
So
Okay.
there's a few things a lot of people don't realize. So well, number one, your blood's going to thicken. Why? So that if the tiger bites you, you don't bleed out. Okay. Then your body fills with acid. And for anyone who's done any research on health, you know that the more acidic that things are, the worse it is. And being generally more alkaline is healthier. So your body's going to fill with acid when we're in the stress response. Why? Because when the tiger bites you, you're not going to taste as good if you're more acidic.
Okay. Then my mind is blowing. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep
So
going.
then blood flow is going to go to our hands and feet so we can run or fight, which that, I think makes sense because then obviously there's less blood flow. So when these other functions are needed, that's how the body determines that. Because when there's no blood flow to your digestive system, that is how it goes on the back burner or the third burner or whatnot.
Yeah.
Same with your reproductive system and also your immune system, because fighting off a cold or dealing with an autoimmune issues is not important when you're being chased, right? And so I think that, from everything you talk about, I'm sure people know that these days we're obviously not being chased by tigers and lions, hopefully, but there's so many everyday things that actually make us feel that way. In my own experience, I think that, partly why I went to that initial therapist, because like I made a big deal out of small things, right? And again, now I understand that it leads back to certain childhood trauma and experiences where everything is a big deal. And it's about, oh, if you make a mistake, you're a bad person. Good girls don't make mistakes. You got to be like, cross your T's and dot your I's, right? So that's why I said, oh my God, I made a mistake. What's going to happen, right? Am I going to get blamed, right? And what's really interesting about that blame or shame, which I think is kind of similar, is from an autoimmune perspective, especially, is that from a bigger picture, it just causes a lot of stress because you think, oh no, I did something wrong, right? And then people equate I did something wrong to I'm a bad person. And if I'm a bad person, then I'm not going to be loved. And I'm not loved, then I'm going to be rejected. And if I'm rejected, then back in the day, what happens if you're rejected from a tribe?
You get
They
eaten.
kick you out and you get eaten by a lion.
It's the imminent threat is you will be eaten.
Yeah. So, I think that my own personal experience, right? It's like thinking that everything is a big deal. And my initial response to anything would be like, oh, right? Versus like, hold on a second, what's happening here? Like, I talk about this with my son who's 8, but it's like, is this a big problem, a medium problem, or a large problem? It's like a big thing in like the BCBA space. But it's the same thing, right? I wasn't doing a lot of that. And so that created a lot more stress that worst case scenario, what's the chances of worst case scenario happening? It's less than 3%, I think research shows.
Oh, wow.
But our body And our minds, well, our minds thinks it's going to happen, and our body feels what our mind is thinking, right? So then you're creating this stress, this high cortisol, this acidity, all of which is going to lead to health issues. And then, personally for me, also another big thing is, well, it's both people pleasing and it's all of them actually. Let me just admit that. But I think, the people pleasing was really big for me in the sense of, again, growing up being like, children should be seen and not heard, and you're a good little girl, and this is what good girls do. And hey, did you hear so and so asked you this? Well, it doesn't matter how you feel. It's good to be helpful. Go do that because so and so asked you. It's okay if you don't want to, but listen, he's a nice person, but whatever, like go do that because good girls need to do what they're told, kind of thing. And so now, again, I know where it stems from. I didn't know then. And now, you and I have worked through a lot of that stuff to really heal some of that inner child trauma that happens. But the people pleasing is something that from my, like in my personal experience, right, was just doing the things that I felt like I should be doing, even though I didn't want to. And I think it taught me, it gave me good. I mean, it gave me some good teachings here and there, but at the end of the day, if you're doing something, there's this tug in your belly where you're like, "Ah, I don't want to, but I should, right? It's just that discomfort. Most people are like, yeah, whatever, but it affects us. It affects us in so many more ways than we realize. And then the perfectionism was another big thing for me. I always say I don't do anything half ass. I don't know if we can
Yeah.
say ass. And so, and that is anything from I'm not going to put out a program until it's perfect to I'm not going to do an interview until it's perfect, or I'm not going to create content until it's perfect. And, I think back, and this is more from a professional side. We'll talk about the patient side in a second, but I remember, even, I don't know, 2012 or so, I wanted to do so much on YouTube and then just felt like, yeah, I don't know, like it's not perfect enough. And, I think back, like, my gosh, like all this content that I have now, like I could have had so much more if I just did that starting 10 years ago. So I think, professionally definitely affects you in many places. But I think from just what I see with my clients and people that I work with, and, for anyone who's dealing with health issues, oftentimes one thing that I see with autoimmunity in general is this feeling of, oh no, like I'm not being a good girl. And so like shame really factors into that. And what happens is that it creates this high cortisol. And then it actually, what's interesting with autoimmunity in general is that in autoimmunity, the immune system is confused. And so it starts attacking your organs, whether it's your thyroid and Hashimoto's or your brain in, like a couple different things like lupus, for example, or MS, it's your brain, and arthritis would be your joints. Right? I think autoimmunity has a very general, like the function is the same. It's the immune system that's confused and starts attacking, but the actual organ that it attacks is different. And that the name of the autoimmune is dependent on the organ it attacks, but the actual function is the same, right? It's the immune system that is confused and attacks, right? Now, why and how, like, is it attack the thyroid versus the joints? I think that has to do with the weakest link. So, there could be genetic predisposition, or maybe someone, that organ is already a little bit weaker for that person, which is why it goes there. But what's interesting with autoimmunity is that if you have one autoimmune disease, if you don't do anything to support it, you can develop up to 8 different autoimmune diseases in your lifetime. And I'm not saying this obviously to scare anyone anyway, but more just to say that it goes back to the immune system, right? Because when it's confused, it's going to attack one organ. And if it continues to be confused, it's going to attack the next and the next, right? That's just how it works. But how is this important for what we're talking about? Well, it's because what controls the immune system?
The
The
nervous
nervous system.
system.
That's right. And people don't think about that. I mean, really, the nervous system controls everything. Like it's at the top here, it controls everything. And so, of course, when we talk about balancing the immune system, I talk about things like there's certain foods that are inflaming you that we want to be mindful of, right? There are certain nutrients you could be deficient in that could affect you. There are certain toxins you can have, like I had mercury. There's certain infections like candida or other gut infections, right? And they are all important, but then the nervous system piece is kind of the overarching that it's going to affect everyone. And so in some situations, let's say someone, I call them triggers, right? Let's just say someone has 10 triggers. Maybe they have an infection and then they have a food sensitivity, right? But then they all have some kind of stress past, something with any of these sabotages.
Right.
So a lot of times it's not about getting rid of every single trigger because sometimes it's almost impossible to get rid of them. But if you get rid of 2 or 3 of the biggest ones, and the nervous system ones just play such a big role, it's amazing what your body can do on its own, right? So it's not about that we have to do everything. It's like, let's kind of take the low hanging fruit, if you will, and then like allow the body to do its healing. Because, people say like, oh, the body knows how to heal. And I think we take that for granted and we're like, "Ah, whatever." But really, truly, like your body does know how to heal. And so it just needs help, right? It can't heal when you give it no raw materials and a bad environment. It's like a fish in a dirty fish tank. Like you're not going to have a healthy fish. So we got to clean up the environment, which is here and here, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's in the head and it's all around you. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness, I love that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and so what I find with clients that really make breakthroughs, I mean, yeah, we work on their diet and yeah, they take the right supplements and that's important. But when they look at where did shame come into their life, right? And work through that, or, where are they people pleasing? Because here's the thing, like if you're doing something because someone wants you to, or it's the right thing to do, but you don't want to, whether you feel it or not, it's affecting you. And most people do feel it, but they just ignore it because they think, but I should. So it doesn't matter if I get this pull here or this, that, but everything is connected in our body, right? And it all then eventually turns into there's a physical manifestation for all of that. And I have some people who I worked with who we've done a lot, and they might have gotten 70% better, right? But their thyroid antibodies maybe are still not down, or there's certain symptoms that they still have no matter what we do and how many supplements they take. And it's not until they are able to see, oh my gosh, I've been in this relationship and I'm either too afraid to leave, or it's just I feel like I should, or I feel bad for this person, or whatever it is, right? They're doing some kind of people pleasing. It's not until they make that shift, or with a job, or with a friend, or whatever it may be, and it's that literally almost instantly then transforms them, and they skyrocket their results.
Wow. That is phenomenal. Okay, so two things I just want to highlight from what you just said, that the nervous system is basically in charge of whether or not your immune system is functioning the right way, your digestive system is functioning the right way. So paying attention and I loved what you said when when your therapist was like, where do you feel that anger in your body? And you're like, it's in my mind, like it's not in my body. And most of us do start off that disconnected. And that's a great survival response when we're little, right? Because if we felt the full weight of our dysregulation all the time, we just wouldn't survive it. So our body has these fantastic dissociation and denial mechanisms that we can use when we're little. And then when you're an adult, though, if you start to have specifically the physical manifestations of a really stressed out system, and a system that's been running in survival mode for years, decades, then we have to actually start getting reconnected with the body. I love that what you're helping people with is, yes, you're coming to me with this, with like an illness basically, but also let's reintegrate your whole body back together. That's such a beautiful thing. And then just this idea that if you're having trouble moving the needle on your physical well being, let's start looking at the emotional and the mental load that you're carrying. Because if you've got, maybe a nervous system, like in the way that you're using the word trigger, it's like in instances or events or, stressors on the system. If you've got a nervous system trigger, something that's causing you prolonged stress, like I was in an abusive relationship and didn't realize that that's what was going on. I literally just kept thinking, if I were good enough, if I were better, then I would be treated better. And so that cycle kept me sick. I mean, I went through 9 months where I just really couldn't walk. Like my knees swelled up really badly and I had all this medical trauma after my son's birth. Didn't know how blind I was to the pain I was experiencing in my nervous system. And I got diagnosed during that. It just made me think of this when you said that. During that time, one of the things they diagnosed me with, along with just like hypermobile joints I had been injured. And so I couldn't work out and so all this stuff. And it blew all out of proportion. But one of the things they said during that time was it was arthritis in my knees and in my fingers. And I had no idea at that point that that is an autoimmune issue. I was like, I guess I'm just getting old. Like I was like 30. I was like, what's happening? And so that idea that the nervous system stuff can just affect your physical body so much. And I like also what you said about you don't have to tackle everything all at once. Maybe just try and focus on the top few triggers, whatever you're ready to tackle now, because I was not ready to tackle getting out of an abusive relationship at this time that I had all the physical issues happening. I was not ready. My mind, my nervous system, my emotions, I could not. People tried to suggest it to me and I was like, no, because they clearly just didn't understand that I was most of the problem. And so it's a really hard place to be. And I look back on that young woman and I'm like, God bless her. She was just surviving the best she could, but her body was telling her it's time to find safety for your nervous system. So I just so appreciate the way that you kind of untangled all of that for us. So, on the other side of tackling those triggers, what have you seen become available to people? Obviously, it will move the needle on the physical healing. What kinds of breakthroughs did either you experience or do you see your clients experience once they start to focus in on the sabotage and the nervous system survival mode stuff?
So, I mean, the biggest thing I think to summarize would just be freedom. But if we kind of break it apart, because I know that's more general, I mean, it's essentially being able to do what it is that you want to do,
I
right?
love that.
What a novel concept, right? But I mean, I think I'll talk about a couple personal things and then I'll talk about things with my clients on the physical side of stuff. But, I think with me personally, untangling a lot of that and seeing that I don't have to hold it all together. I don't have to always be a good girl, right? That I am allowed to enjoy things and do things just because, and not because I need to earn it or I need to work first before resting. Because, if you're resting, you're lazy. I don't know if you knew that,
Oh,
but
no, no, I think I invented that.
no, I was actually, like, literally told that. Like, "You can't be lazy and rest. Only when you finish all your work, then you rest. But if you don't have enough time to rest, that's okay. You finish your work tomorrow and then you rest because work comes first and then your reward is to rest." And for the longest time, I believed that. And I have to be honest, I'm still a little bit of a recovering person of this because I do sometimes like, oh, let me just finish this and I'll rest. Like, no, no, no. Like, rest is essential. And I say so often to people, like, if you don't rest, you can't repair. And if you can't repair, you can't, like, all the good foods you're eating aren't going to absorb, right? All the supplements you're taking aren't going to actually, it's just going to be like very expensive urine.
Sorry, wait.
Um,
So funny. It's really true. I mean, that's like you're just your body is just like the supplements are exiting right out and the nutrients are exiting right out because your body can't digest anything when you're in that sympathetic nervous system response, which is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? You have to get into the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest cycle, in order for it to even matter that you're working so stinking hard on your health.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, so I think for me, it's just like unwinding that and doing inner child work and all of the things. My goodness, so many different things, which is great. I'm so glad I did. I think it just opened up more freedom and more just like being able to enjoy things and be okay with that. And I also think also more flow. And what I mean when I say more flow is just like kind of really feeling like what I want, tuning into myself, but also the universe, and then things just happening. So when I'm in flow and I'm doing something that lights me up and is exciting, then like things just go in the right direction. Like whether that is, getting other clients that I love working with or creating more programs that people need, different things like that, create that flow. And I think for those that I work with, both with one-on-one and in my programs, they're just finding obviously better energy, less brain fog, more weight loss, feeling better, but it's also like getting back to themselves, right? And I think it's similar with them where it's like they're feeling better, but then they're also realizing, oh my gosh, like I hated this job. I'm going to do something else, and then actually being really successful at it and, finding new relationships, finding a lot of synchronicities as well. I think that, when things are meant to be, they're meant to be. But a lot of times we're so in our head that we're not even seeing all of the different opportunities for those things. And so being more open and in tune to then allow some of these synchronicities to come in and happen. So it's a ton of physical improvement, but also like having that lightness with everything else. Like it's just like being able to live your life. And one of the things that my clients say a lot, and it's a word that I never really used much before, but I hear it over and over again when I do my programs and a lot of my contests, people say, like, I want to get my joy back. And I don't know. I guess I just don't know. I never thought of it that way because I don't know. The word joy, like in my upbringing, it was kind of like, oh, who cares if you're happy? Like, just get good grades. You go to a college and then you could be a doctor and then you can like be a upstanding member in society. And like, that's what we want, right? Like, what joy? Like, who cares? So it wasn't really in my vocabulary. But, when people were talking about it through a lot of my content and people were saying that, and people are like, oh my gosh, like, I feel that is so exciting. And to me, also, like, I'm so happy that people can even recognize that they want joy. because a lot of times as women especially, it's just not something that we even allow ourselves to want to talk about or know or God forbid feel, you know?
Right. And I think that the fact that we associate things like joy with rest, and we associate rest with laziness and not being able to hack it if you have to stop working before you're done. That was a huge part of it for me. And I don't think I ever actually heard the words, if you rest you're lazy and the work needs to be done first. But I saw my parents' behavior, and I still don't know if either one of them has taken a break. God bless them. No, they're a lot better about it now than they used to be. But when I was growing up, they were just hustling all the time, and there wasn't any sort of precedent for we work a bit and then we pay attention to when we need a break. Even if the work's not done, it means you are resting, kind of like what you said you say to your clients. If you don't rest, then the rest of the work doesn't really matter. It's not going to integrate well with your system because you're going to stay in that survival mode state. Yeah, I mean, feeling joy, what is that? I can't even catch a break, right? I mean, that's kind of how I grew up and how it sounds like you did and a lot of your clients. So I love that because we're allowed to have joy. We're allowed to have rest. We're allowed to have peace. We're allowed to have joy in our work and joy in our rest. I mean, it's like it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. So for someone, our time has flown by the way. We need to close out here really soon. And I just feel like we could talk for hours. So maybe there's a part two in this somewhere. I want to ask you, for someone who's listening now and maybe she has some of the physical issues that we've been talking about, maybe she knows some things about her condition, or maybe she's one of the people that's been to the Mayo Clinic and nobody can give her answers, where would be the very first place that she should start? Like, what's the baby step that we could break down and that you could recommend for her today that could help her with her wholeness journey of healing?
Yeah, so I think that, of course, obviously it depends a little bit on what the ailment is, but even uh, that aside, I think that the biggest thing is just tuning into our body and actually feeling what's happening. Because even with the fatigue, right? Like that's just one of the symptoms that I hear a lot. Like I'm so tired. Okay, well, where do you feel tired? Right? Like, and actually making that connection to what you feel and where you feel it, and then starting to do even a little bit, I mean, just starting somewhere with nervous system regulation. That could be as simple as taking a few deep breaths, doing like a box breath where we breathe in, hold, breathe out, and hold. And then just noticing after I did that, did anything shift, right? I'm not saying that this is going to be like all your fatigue is going to go away after doing that, right? But what shifted? Just start to really kind of have that conversation with our body like, hey, body, I know you're struggling. We're trying to figure it out. But like when I do this, is this better or worse? If I do this, how does this feel? Right. So just kind of reestablishing that connection. I mean, I also think food plays a huge role. So just eating things that are clean and taking out a lot of the sugars and the processed foods and the chemicals, because that's one of the quickest ways to see changes. But again, not if you're super stressed, right? So it's a combo, right? Of doing calming stuff, changing out our diet, and then also just getting good sleep. So a lot of times people have trouble sleeping just based on different things. So I always recommend trying to get sunlight first thing in the morning in your eyes. Doesn't have to be that you have to go outside, but just, looking out the window and getting some, not directly, but like in your peripheral vision for 5 to 10 minutes, because that resets the circadian rhythm. And so then at night, we want to be mindful about dimming the lights and using the blue light blocking glasses if you can, not doing a lot of screens, doing things that are just more kind of sedating. And sometimes, even just those small things could be enough to actually fix someone's insomnia or whatever is going on. Because when we are stressed, whether it's from current events or past events, and most people, it's not just current events, it's going to be a lot of past, the circadian rhythm does become off and our cortisol does become offset, where cortisol is too high at night and too low in the morning, and it should be the opposite. And so just resetting that by getting sunlight in the morning and dimming the lights at night, it's so simple, but it literally like just resets it for you. And then any nervous system stuff and then taking out inflammatory foods can make a huge difference.
Wow. And I love that you just broke down several small steps. So if you hear this, if you're listening today and you're hearing this, pick the thing that doesn't make your system feel like it's freaking out. For me, for a long time, when people were like, "Oh, we need to change your diet," I was like, "You know what? You can just you can just F right off. Like, I'm not interested in doing that right now. I'm going to eat all the bread and I'm going to eat all the sugar because I was just surviving. But I could start taking the deep breaths. And eventually that led me to a place of self awareness where it felt aligned to change how I was eating. So don't force yourself to do anything. But I love that Ina just gave these amazing small baby steps that you can start taking. And the fact that you're listening today, that's a huge step in the right direction. The fact that you're searching out content that's going to help balance your body and regulate your nervous system is a really wonderful thing. Thank you so much for that, Ina. Okay, so now the last two questions I always ask every guest. This one is, what is your current favorite pump up song? Because we talk on the podcast a lot about things that can kind of give a pattern interrupt to stress and survival mode. And that's one of them is music. So do you have something that you like to listen to get yourself pumped up or to start your day off or when you're feeling like you're down in a funk and you want to start feeling peppy again?
It's different things, but sometimes I just go back to like oldies but goodies, like Eye of the Tiger or something of Bon Jovi, like anything of Bon Jovi. I feel
Any
like you
Bon
can't
Jovi.
go wrong with Bon Jovi.
It's really true. It's really true. Just get a little pump up going there. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll all go find some Bon Jovi today. A little Eye of the Tiger. My high school, we were Tigers, so Eye of the Tiger is like part of my makeup. We would play that song at every single sporting event. Okay, and then the last question I want to ask you is, when you don't have a lot of time, but you know you need to nurture yourself, you need a little bit of self-care. What is it that is your go-to thing? Do you have one or two things that you're like, okay, I know I don't have much time, but I'm going to go do this?
Yep, I have like 4 things and then I sort of just rotate. So if it's like super quick, it's doing that box breath. There's another thing called the 61 point meditation, which you can find on YouTube. And it's essentially, it takes like maybe 7 minutes and they go through like a few points, like here and like shoulders and like different areas of the body. And you just focus on that. It's guided. If you just look up 61 point meditation on YouTube, it's free. You could see that. So that'll do that because that's quick. I do a lot of self hypnosis and I have some recordings of that. And I have an app. It's through Gray Space where the app's free actually as well. And so I'll listen to that. Usually I'll pick like a 5 or a 10-minute one, or I'll do a little vinyasa flow. I don't even do it guided. I just do it on my own. Like I'll start with child's pose and then I'll do like downward dog and do a few warriors. And it just feels like it's stretching. There's a little bit of breath. Sometimes, honestly, if I am busy, what I did this morning is I had some Voxer messages I wanted to catch up on from friends. So I did that while I listened to Voxer. I don't talk on Voxer because it's kind of hard to do that and talk, but I listened while I did that and it worked great. So
That's so nice. I like pairing things together too. Something that you have to do with something that helps regulate your system is always a nice way to do it.
mhm.
Ina, thank you so much. There is seriously so much gold in here, you guys. I hope that this was really helpful for you. Ina, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing so freely. And you guys, she shares so much good information in all of her platforms. I mean, Ina, I just, something I appreciate about you so much as just a consummate professional and specialist in your field, but also as somebody who's passionately out there trying to serve. You offer so much information just like to anybody who wants to hear it. And you have amazing programs, as well. So guys, go check out all of the places that you can find her on Instagram and other places. She's got her YouTube going, all the different things that you can find. And you're going to just be changed by listening to Ina. So I'm so grateful for you. And I'm so grateful that we're friends. And I maybe we do kind of parlay this into another episode down the road and we can get more into the nitty gritty. So thank you so much for your time today. I super
Of
appreciate you being here.
course. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and all the work that you do because you're like a miracle worker. I know I've said that to you before. So you just can like take things and see them for what they are and be like, dude, this is what you do. That's it. Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you for all the information you put out and all the people who you help, myself included.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet. Guys, I did not pay her to say that. Thank you so much, Ina. All right, everybody, take such good care of yourself, and we will see you here next time.